up, or if you're on Zoom, you can shout out your question. We'll also do questions and answers at the end, and I will attempt, even if it's not about the program, to answer your gardening questions, which sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. We'll see what we can do. I particularly love water garden features. I'm a Pisces, so I love the water. I try to be in the water as much as I can. But I've always found that having a water feature in your garden, whether it's very simple or elaborate, it tends to draw the animals in and the birds in. And if you have something like a little fountain or waterfall, the sound is just really beautiful. So I've always enjoyed doing water features, and I've done probably 8 or 10 of them. So we'll start here. Okay, so some of the things to think about if you're thinking about a water feature in your garden is, what is your purpose that you would like to achieve? Is it a landscape accent? Do you want to try to bring color and sound to your garden? You don't have to be as elaborate as, if any of you go to the Hyannis Country Garden, oh my God, they have such a gorgeous water feature with all those big koi in it. Doesn't have to be elaborate like that. It can be a lot smaller. You see in this picture here, you can even see a little waterfall that you can build in that. And as I said, it promotes a wildlife habitat, frogs, turtles, birds. You're going to see a picture at the very end. A couple years ago, I had a pair of red fox that were coming all winter and all spring, and they were drinking out of our little pond. It didn't bother the goldfish at all, but they were having a good time at the pond. And we have many conservation protection zones on Cape Cod. And if you look, this black area in here, which we're in Eastham for the most part, is box turtle habitat. And they are not threatened, but they are protected. Occasionally I will see one crossing Dire Prince Road where I work. You see one sort of in the middle on the right-hand side. That's what the box turtles look like, and they are protected. Okay, go. The box turtles are territorial. They mostly eat, they're good for us because they eat slugs and insects and snails, and they like mushrooms, berries, and seeds, and they frequently enter shaded, shallow ponds or puddles to avoid the heat. I've even found them when it's been raining out a lot. I sometimes will find that they've nestled into damp leaves. It's someplace else. So this particular picture, this is not mine, but I found this one, and this woman, I believe, lives in Maine, and she did this habitat to make it turtle friendly. If you can see where she's standing, she's only about up to her ankles in water, so that's very shallow. That's something that the turtles like. She did that little habitat, and that's just an example of something that the box turtles would like. So they need something that is no deeper than 18 inches. In fact, they like it shallower than that. But they do need an entry and an exit point. And if you see on this slide how this is a little water garden done with a plastic liner, you can see it kind of slopes down. Well, that gives them an exit and an entry point that they can easily get in and get out. So planning your water garden, one thing you should think about is how much sunlight you have. I will tell you that the water garden I have now at my house on Dire Prince Road is under a very large oak tree, and it's fine. But I cannot grow the water lilies and the lotus and all those beautiful plants you see at Hyannis Country Garden because I don't get enough sun there. And that's okay with me. I'm all right with that. But if you want plants in a water feature, they usually need 5 to 8 hours of sun. Things like water lilies and lotus generally need about 8 hours, so they need even more. There's a trade-off because the sunnier it is, the more likely you are to get an algae bloom, which is what turns the water icky, greenish brown color. The shadier it is and the cooler the water, the less likely the algae bloom is. There are some plants that do like partial shade, and if you're trying to do a turtle habitat, significant shade is particularly good. Falling leaves and plant debris can harm plants and fish. And I can tell you, and I meant to take a picture and forgot, in the fall, we cover probably third week in September, we put up what looks like a mesh tent that goes over our pond to keep the leaves out of it, because the decomposing leaves, especially oak leaves, are very harmful to the fish as well as any plants that you might have in there. It also is a pain in the neck to clean in the spring. So ponds less than 100 gallons should have some afternoon shade if you have plants or fish, because otherwise they can get too warm. Okay, and right, next slide. So another consideration is how much space you have that you might put in a water feature. And you can go as simply, and I think I have a slide in here. I've seen very effective, like a wine barrel or a whiskey barrel made into a water feature. I've seen that. It can be as simple as that, something that maybe isn't more than perhaps 2 feet round. If you want to go really simple, that's very possible. But one of the things that you should think about is the amount of space that you have to do a water feature, especially because water lilies and lotus are usually large and need lots of sun and lots of space. I have one little tiny water lily that blooms about once every 3 years because I don't get enough sun in my pond. But again, if you go to Hyannis Country Garden, you're going to see lovely water lilies. And bog plants are these plants that you're seeing over here that are kind of on a shelf. They're not totally submerged. A submerged plant would be a water lily or a lotus, but the bog plants, generally, they're in a pot, they're not all the way to the bottom. There are some nice bog plants. I'll show you the bog plants. The other thing that you can put in is floating plants, and I always put in water hyacinths every year, and you have to take them out before the frost because they are tropical, but they multiply through the summer and they have long roots. And if you have goldfish or koi in your pond, they love those long roots to spawn in. So, and they're very readily available at garden centers, the floating plants. And if you want fish or no fish is another consideration. During warm weather, a fish can grow 1 inch a month. And if it's a koi, it can be even more. But goldfish, tends to be 1 inch a month. They add nitrogen to the water, which contributes to algae, unfortunately. So sometimes water clarity can be an issue. And your pond will need more frequent cleaning if you have fish. And that can be a significant task. I send my husband in, he doesn't like doing it. And fish can attract unwanted predators too. And I have to tell you, the pond that I have at my house, Fire Prince, we've had it for 5 years. I had some goldfish that were, that long. Goldfish won't get to be the size of koi. I went away to Annapolis, Maryland, to help teach a program down there. I came home I didn't have a single fish. And I still don't know what it was. It might have been a raccoon, a fisher cat, I'm not sure. There was one little tiny black fish at the bottom when we emptied the pond, and I had no idea why. So my netting that I have up for the leaves, that's gonna stay up till May, because I suspect somebody was really hungry, one of the woodland creatures was really hungry at the beginning of April. It's better if you are going to have fish to be at least 36 inches, and koi, not goldfish. If it freezes over, which it rarely does here on Cape Cod, koi need broken water. When I lived in Pennsylvania, I lived in the Poconos when I was working. I'm from New England originally, but we worked in we lived in the Poconos where we worked for a while. I'd freeze over solid and I had koi. I always had to have like a cattle water trough thing that kept the water unbroken. So koi need water that they can come up to, but rarely on the Cape does it ever freeze. And goldfish, it can freeze almost to the bottom and they're fine. Goldfish are very hardy. And fish, especially koi, will eat and destroy your plants. So goldfish, like I just said, it can freeze over in the winter and they're fine. There are minimal diseases. It could be as shallow as 18 inches. They're inexpensive to buy. When we lost all our fish, a neighbor gave me a couple, but I went and to like PetSmart or Petco, and I got those little 10 for $2 feeder fish. And the interesting thing was, I said to the person getting the fish, I said, pick pretty ones. And she said, what are you using it for? And I said, I'm putting them in a pond. And she said, oh goody, they're not going to be fed to a snake. I'll find nice ones. So she spent a lot of time scooping out very nice fish. Well, those little fish that were like 1.5 inches are now about 3 inches. And so, you know, you don't have to spend a lot if you want goldfish, and they grow. And there's usually enough natural food. I do put what's called koi or goldfish flakes in there, which is fine. Goldfish don't significantly destroy plants, and they aren't as likely to attract predators, although something got into them this year for me. And they, because they're smaller, they eat, their excrement isn't as much, so there's not as much nitrogen as you would have with koi that can get quite large. So again, we talked about a good depth for goldfish, and you can see shallow, mid-level, deep. That would be great for goldfish. And koi, like I said, they're likely to eat your plants. You might need a de-icer if we have a really cold winter. Your depth should be about 36 inches. I've heard a lot of people talk about on the Cape how the herons and the raccoons will get the koi. Because the goldfish are kind of skittish. I mean, they'll see me, I'll go out and go fishy, 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 and they know they're gonna get fed. But the koi will actually eat out of your hands. And when they see a shadow, they say, I'm gonna get fed. So if you have a heron or if you have a raccoon in the area, they make a very nice dinner for them. So that's why I say you may need to net it. And they do add a lot of nitrogen, needs frequent cleaning. They can be expensive to buy, and they are disease prone. So this is what I mean by netting. I think you can see it, and there's some koi in that particular pond, but that's what I mean by netting. I have a friend who, she has a real problem with herons. And what you can do with herons is you can put little stakes around your pond and put fishing line. And when the heron steps to it, they feel something and then they back up. I wouldn't guarantee that would work, but it's worked for my friend. So construction, you can use containers. Like I said, you could use like a whiskey barrel. My first pond or two, I used a precast plastic pond. You can get them at the big box stores and they're pretty inexpensive. You can even buy them, so they're plastic and they have like a little waterfall on them. They're not too expensive. Something bigger than a 45 mil rubber liner with an underlayment. And here we have so much sand, you almost don't need an underlayment. All I did was I put down a tarp, just so if there were any roots sticking up, it didn't go through the underlayment. But I've used old rugs I was gonna throw out. Again, you usually want a depth of at least 18 to 24 inches. And care is needed. Again, if you have pets or children, our house was on the hydrangea tour 2 years ago. And I had no problem. I had 800 people in 4 days. And my only small issue where my heart was in my throat was about a 6-year-old boy who was standing on the stones at the edge of the pond, teetering. And I thought, oh my God, he's going in. And he didn't. But, you know, it is a consideration if there are young children or if you have curious pets. And locate it where you'll see it and enjoy it. You need access to water, obviously, and you need electricity if it's something that's of substantial size, because you're going to need a pump. You're going to need a pump to circulate the water, and you're going to need a filter. And sometimes you need to check your local zoning. You may need a permit, and you might have to check with Dig Safe.
So you need a filter even if you don't have fish.
If you don't have fish, you could do without a filter. And you could, I would still suggest that you have a pump that circulates so the water doesn't go stagnant. But if you have no fish, you really don't need a filter. And you should be fine.
And you're usually good for the season.
Yeah, and I would say, and I don't know if I have it in here, we always, no matter how clean, we try to keep our pond. In the spring, when it goes from cold water to warmer water, there's a product you can buy on Amazon or almost anywhere online. It's called liquid barley. And it doesn't hurt fish, it doesn't hurt plants, and oh my goodness, it turns your water clear. I mean, people used to years ago say, get a little bale of barley and throw it in. Well, I tried that, it made a mess, but there's liquid barley and it works well. But if you don't have fish, you can probably, if you're just circulating the water, would probably be okay. So. Okay, so we talked about the plastic containers, and you can use a mix of plants if you like. Here, I was talking about, you can also use like a rain barrel or some large tubs made for water gardens. You don't have to have it necessarily in the ground. And you can use a mix of plants, and these are available at a variety of places. The tall spiky ones, you can get broadleaf ones, you can get some that kind of cascade, you can get floating ones. Usually they're planted in a heavy pot packed with clay so that the dirt doesn't go all over, and I always put like pea gravel on the top. Your submerged plants, if you don't have, like I showed a shelf, you can always put bricks and raise them a little bit with bricks. And again, if you're using plants, it's best to have at least 6 hours of sun. And there are fertilizer tabs that you can push down into the soil. Also, you have to make sure, this is another reason to have like a fountain or something that's keeping the water moving on the surface, so that you don't get a lot of mosquitoes. If it's stagnant, it's going to be a mosquito farm, which none of us want. Okay, here's just an example of how you could do plants. You could have some bog plants that are raised. The submerged plant would probably be a lily, and there's a pump bottom. And this is illustrating something you could do with a really large pot. as opposed to, in the ground with a pond.
What are the planters made out of? It looked like they were mesh or something?
For the plants,
Yeah, that's the merge plants.
yeah, usually you can use one of two things. You can use, a clay pot. You can use, I'm gonna call it a soft plastic pot, sort of like you buy plants in the garden center in. Or you can use, it's almost, like you said, it's almost like a mesh. It's like an open weave.
And is there a planting medium in them?
Usually use a clay so that it's not like getting all over the place with a little bit of stone on the top. And again, the garden centers that are selling the plants will have the media. So, and they don't need, those plants don't need a lot of soil. So that's a good thing. So, all right, this is my house. This is when I dug the pond that I have. This is about an 8 foot circle. And, except for the help of, a little bit of help from, the guys who cut my lawn, I dug that myself. It's pretty easy. We've got sand, so it makes it easy. And what you can see here is that, my husband and I are engineers. So to make sure it was level, we put some stakes in and then did, line across to make sure the ground was level, so the pond wasn't gonna be like that. So that's the beginning. That was when I dug it. And then that's my husband standing in it. We did not do a shelf. But you can see this is about 24 inches. If you see my husband in there, he's about 6 foot. So that's what it looked like. And again, remove any stones, roots, or anything sharp. Actually, I thought I used a tarp. This is landscape fabric that I use in my vegetable garden. It's a woven type of plastic, and we just literally draped it where there were any roots, so they wouldn't stick through the liner.
Is that a bed of hay or is that just your yellow sand?
You know, I think it's the yellow sand. It doesn't look like hay, but I think it's just the sand because of. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's just the sand, but it does look like hay. So look at it, I go, what was that? Okay, there's the rubber liner. And when you put it in, this was a 2-person job. When you put it in, you pull out as many of the wrinkles as you can. There's always gonna be some wrinkles, but you pull out as many wrinkles as you can. And you need your liner to be 24 feet, and you need it to overlap on the edge. So I don't know how big that was exactly. I would suspect that was at least 16 by 16, I would guess. But there are websites that help you figure that. And then you fill it with water. And as it fills with water, it kind of smooths out some of those wrinkles and makes it actually, makes it look a lot better when it's water in it. And then that was it full, and you can see the big edges, and what we did is I cut off the excess around the sides, but you don't want to cut it too close. And then what I did is I just edged it with stone over on the far right side in the middle. You can see the stones that I bought from a landscape place. They're just flat. They were nothing special. And then I just started to lay the stones around the edge. And then that's pretty much what it looked like with the stones. And the stones cover up the plastic liner, or the rubber liner, I should say. And then add some plants. And then I just, where I didn't have stone, I brought my mulch up. There, you can see the mulch. And that was what it kind of looked like after I tidied up the edges. And there's the fish. You can see the fish kind of over on the one side. And then there it is, pretty much finished, and those plants are quite big that are around it. This was 2 years later, what it looked like. Looks like it's a lot more grown in even now.
And you don't have to drain that water out, renew it, you just have chemicals or whatever.
I can tell you that when my husband would normally crawl it and clean it in the spring, when we didn't cover it as well, because then there was a layer of acorns at the bottom, we would drain it to about a foot, and he'd put on like knee-high boots and go in. When we lost all the fish this spring, because we were convinced that's fish in there somewhere, we drained the whole thing. Now, the nice thing about that water, because it's nitrogen rich, it's great for putting on the gardens, because I've got perennial beds all around it. So it was great for the gardens. But we don't typically drain it, and I'm not sure we'll even this spring, because now we have that netted tent thing over it. I don't think we'll drain it. Sometimes in the spring, we'll take it down a foot and put a foot of fresh water in it. But that's just if we get a really bad algae bloom, we'll just add a little bit of fresh water into it. So some of the considerations are consider both ornamental and practical value of plants if you're gonna use plants. Some plants that are below the water will oxygenate, and they'll compete with the algae to keep the water clear. And that's one of the reasons I put the floating hyacinths in, because those roots will pull out some of the nitrogen and help keep the water clean. Your number of plants is limited by the size, and you should never cover more than 2/3 of the surface of the water with plants. And as I said, I buy water hyacinths in the spring. I'll maybe buy 2 or 3 of them that it's a single plant, long roots. And by the end of the summer, I'll have 20 of them. But it's not nearly covering 2/3 of the pond. It's maybe covering a quarter of the pond. Small plants will get large quickly in warm water, which is what I was just saying about the water hyacinths. They'll double, triple, quadruple. If you've got the sun, you can put in water lilies that will give you different colors, foliage plants with textures, and try some, if you're gonna have plants, try some from all those categories, the floating, the surface, the submerged, or the marginal bog, because some will be tall and spiky, some will cascade, really do nice things with plants. Here are some of them. These are the ones that float on the surface, and this water hyacinth is absolutely my favorite. All of these are tropical. None of these will last through the winter, and I pull them out before it starts to get really cold, because I don't want them to die and then go to the bottom of the pond and be icky. But the two that you see most commonly are water hyacinths and the water lettuce. But I like the water hyacinth. If it's got sun, it will get those beautiful purple flowers, and the long roots, the fish love them for spawning. But I've had the others too, and they do work well. Okay, here is a bunch of the different daylilies. You can get tropical or hardy. The tropical, obviously, you have to pull out and store in the winter, but there are so many that are hardy that you can leave right in the water and don't have to do anything to. Yes.
How do you store them in the winter?
I typically get them really wet, and I put them in a plastic bag in my cellar, so that they kind of stay damp, but they're protected. But I very rarely, unless it's a color that is something super, I would just get a hardy one, and then I don't have to mess around with pulling it in the fall, because what will happen is, if you have one that's tropical, guess what? You gotta go in that water and pull it out and store it. And I don't want to get in that water and have to do that. At the bottom of these ponds gets extraordinarily slippery because of the algae. And it's a real fall hazard. So I would just say, if you're gonna have water lilies, look for the hardy ones. There's a lot of varieties. And a lot of them you can get mail order. There's a couple of big places that do a very good job sending them mail order. And if you want something really spectacular, if you've got enough sun in a big enough area, you can put in a lotus too. And how the lotuses grow is they have big leaves, they're on the surface. The water lilies stay at the surface, but a lotus comes up out of the water with its flower, and it's got the most beautiful seed pod with it. I had a couple lotus in my pond in Pennsylvania until a bear got into it and clawed up the sides of the liner.
That's great.
Yeah, well, we had lots of black bears in Pennsylvania, and I think they decided the fish looked like a tasty treat.
Okay.
Decided it was time. Even though I had a half-acre pond in the backyard, no, they had to go into my regular pond. So, here are some submerged plants. These are really good for helping oxygenate and, to keep, the algae down. But the problem with it, is some of these you see in goldfish, or I shouldn't say goldfish, in, aquariums. Thank you.
I was gonna say, I had, when I had an aquarium, I had that one.
Yeah, that one and that one. They're really popular for aquariums. Again, it's a tropical, you lose it in the fall, but they do a great job helping oxygenate the water. So, and here are some of the ones, we're not seeing the top, but I think these are the shelf, the ones that you put on the shelf, the bottom plants. And there are some interesting ones. Some of these, the coup at the top, the water canna, and the taro are tropical, and the rest are hardy. The nice thing about if these are on a shelf, you can easily lift them out and store them if you so desire. That black magic taro, particularly with those black leaves, is very stunning. And the water cannas, you can get some really, really pretty colors out of them.
Is the cardinal flower the same
Yeah.
one you would put in your regular garden?
Yeah.
Wow.
It is. And it can take really being submerged in water, which is amazing that it can, but it can be submerged in water, so. Okay, and then this is just showing that stones help you naturalize. You can have some water dripping, which adds sound, motion. There's all kinds of things that you can do to really make a pond a very peaceful place. I love just sitting by my pond. So here's a couple of other things. I think these are closing thoughts. Like I said, we're not seeing the very top here, but you need at least a little bit of shade. You need periodic cleanup of leaves, even through the summer when I don't have that big tent over. We have like a big net, and we'll net out some leaf debris that gets in there. Shallow is sufficient, 18 inches. If you have goldfish, for turtles, you want an easy entry and exit. Let's see, I guess this must be turtle stuff I'm talking about. Above water, you can have a log, a rock, etc. When I lived in Pennsylvania, we had a lot of the box turtles also. And I'd see 6 or 8 of them on top of like a log that was next to the pond, which they'd be out there sunning themselves. So consider native plants. I'd always say consider native plants. Consider your site. I'd say if you've never had a water feature, start small. Like I said, my first couple, I used those preform liners that you can get pretty inexpensively at Home Depot. In ground, it says need a filter and a pump. You at least need a pump, a filter if you're gonna have fish. There are multiple types. Here's a picture of what I use is the barley for water clarity. It's non-toxic. It helps balance the water. If you're gonna have plants, purchase plants locally so you can see what you're getting. Although if you're looking for water lilies, a lot of times those mail orders do a great job with what they do. And in the winter, all we have for air with the goldfish is we throw in one of those air bubbling stones like you use in an aquarium, just to give them a little bit of air. And I know people who have goldfish that don't even do that in the winter, but I do it, just so they get a little extra bubbling in there. Again, here's some places that you can mail order from. Again, I would say if you can purchase fish locally, there's less nitrogen. It doesn't matter if the water freezes over, they're less destructive to plants. And a good caution is the bigger the water feature, the more work it is.
Okay.
So, and that's true, but there are some sources for it. Okay, now, there's our buddies that were around all in 23. They came in January. It was a male and female. Somewhere they had a den because they had 3 babies, which we saw in the summer, but they would come all winter and drink out at the edge of the pond. So I really liked them. And then the coyotes came back and the fox left. Let's see, do we have anything else? Okay, that's it. So other than what you asked, anybody have a question? Sure.
My objective, my number one objective would be to create a bubbling sound, a water
Yes,
sound. And
yes.
I'm wondering if you have any more advice on how do you design that into the plan? And is that something a homeowner does, or do you go get some expertise somewhere?
No, you can do it as a homeowner. A lot of the, if you have just a pump, what you can do is the pump is down in the water. And what I have, and I don't know if it was in one of those pictures, it's like a big cement fish and the hose comes up through the fish and then squirts out its mouth, and then that makes a bubbling sound. A lot of the filters will have, in the middle of it, will have a plastic pipe that comes up and you put a head on it and it cascades water out. Our pond has both of those. We have the fish that just squirts, and then we have the one that cascades.
Okay.
Now,
Which one creates the most sound? The spray, I would think.
I came home the other day and I said, oh my goodness, that's really cascading water. And my husband said, yeah, I cleaned the spray head. and it does, it creates a lot of sound. The one thing you need to be aware of is with the filters, they do need cleaning. And you can research the filters online. They don't have to be big, complicated and expensive. I think the one that we have, I think we have 2, they're called box filters. I think they're maybe this long by that wide, by that high. And what they have in there is they have a couple of layers of like it's like a porous mesh. And my husband will pull them out of the pond and he just sprays them off, puts them back in, lowers them back into the pond. And in the heat of the summer, he may be cleaning that filter twice a week. Because of the algae, because it's warm. But I would say by the time it gets to September, he's doing that much, maybe once every 2 weeks. And that's about the same in the
What
spring.
is a filter look like? I mean, is it like a dryer filter, is it?
The material that's inside it,
Is it a box?
yeah, it's like a box.
Okay.
It's like a container, it's black plastic usually, and then it's open on the top, it's plastic, but it's got like rows where some of it's open and some of it's closed. And then it usually has right in the center of it a hole that you can put that pipe into then to create the cascade.
And typically with tropical fish, there'll be some kind of a filamentous thing on top, and below it would be like big chunks of charcoal.
Yes, that's not usually, you don't usually get the charcoal and, you know.
But you do have the filaments.
Yeah, you usually do. So, and they're pretty, like I said, that could be a whole lecture onto itself of the filters and the pumps and whatever. But, it's pretty easy to research it online. And you don't need, like I said, my pond is about 8 foot round approximately. And, my husband runs 2 of those inexpensive box filters. One actually goes to the fish that squirts, and the other one is the cascade. And like I said, they're not, you know, and what he does is he, because the electric wire, comes out, so he pulls the wire to the edge, pulls the filter up, takes the top off, takes what's inside that needs to be cleaned, hoses it, puts it back in, and he's funny because he's sometimes out there with like a hoe, and puts it out and then drops it down in. So it's not
Okay.
extraordinarily hard to do, but really creates a lot of nice sound. And I would suggest if you've never had one before, either start with like a whiskey barrel that has a bubbler in it, or one of those preform, and buy a small filter with a cascade, and it will give you that lovely sound.
Okay, and the size of the spray or whatever it is, ought to match the size of the pond.
Yeah,
You don't
and
want it
is
to spray outside.
Sort of directly proportional to the size of the
Yeah,
filter.
So can you control the sprays?
I think, and I should have brought my husband with me, but I think the pipe that goes out has like a screw turn on it
Uh-huh.
that you can graduate how much water comes out of it, if
Uh-huh.
I'm not mistaken. He's like a pump guy, so I don't, he does the
I
pump.
have a small home and it can be adjusted.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, so
Solar powered, fountains.
I have a, it's a lady turning over a bucket and then it's a big thing of water below it. And I have tried like every solar powered pump to get that to spray. And I haven't found one that was very effective. And that's just with something that's like a basin of water of 5 gallons and just goes up like a foot or two to go out of her squirting tank.
You're trying to build certain amount of water in there, right? So
Yeah, you need the water, you need the sun,
I have one in my bird bath,
so it sprinkles it, that's nice. I've used them in the bird bath,
but for a pond,
and they're getting better and better. The technology's getting better and better, so I wouldn't discount that at some point that would work.
rather than running the electrical.
I know, exactly.
Yeah, just gonna say, have a bird bath.
Yeah, and that's
That
wonderful.
makes more- I mean, that makes sound.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and yeah, those are wonderful, and actually the moving water tends to attract the birds to it too.
Or
So
in a big flower pot, you can put one in there too.
you could
And
probably
you
try
get a
that.
nice sound.
Yeah, you could probably try it in one of those big flower pots too. I just would think if it's something in the ground, it's probably not big enough. But like I said, the technology is getting better and it's getting less expensive too.
The pond is really beautiful. You know.
I really enjoy it.
Do you bury the electric
Yeah.
wire from the house? to
Yeah.
the front?
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be really deep. You know, is like a little tool that my husband has that does like a 1 inch trench. And we get down like 6 or 8 inches and we do it, and then he yells at me if I'm planting hostas out right near the pond, but don't hit the electrical wire. And we just have it on ground balls. You know, so that if, you know, the electric got frayed or something, it would shut off. It would shut off, so nobody gets electrocuted. Any other questions?
No, I was just gonna say this gentleman, I have a blue Jardiniere, fountain, and it has a bumper in it. You
Yeah.
know, and I put flower pots around it, and it gives me that sound of the water feature without all of the work of a pond. But I will say that I have it under my bedroom window, and I would hear it at night, and it would make me have to go to the bathroom.
Where would you get something like that?
At a
Would that be
garden center, I bought it.
the,
It's about probably this big, it's beautiful, it's a big red clay pot, and it has its own built-in little filter, it plugs in, and it makes a beautiful sound, you know, gentle bubbling sound.
you said Harwich Garden Center?
No, I bought it off Cape before I moved here, but a garden center would have that.
Okay.
I think probably your on-Cape place, you'd most likely be able to find that would be Hyannis Country Garden. Because they've got a lot of pumps and they've got a lot of filters.
And they got a big, emphasis on water.
Yes, they do, and they've got a beautiful koi pond outside. And they also, in the spring into the summer, are selling koi and shabunkins and all kinds of.
They sell their pots 50% off at this time of the year.
See,
Yeah.
there you go, maybe go down and you
Got
can
the
find
email.
one for next year. So, did you have a question?
Yes, I've read that water lilies don't produce flowers if there's moving water. Does that make much difference?
You know, I've heard that too, but I can tell you, when I lived in Pennsylvania and I had that pretty big pond and I had a big waterfall that came into it, so there was a lot of water moving and the water lilies bloomed. So if it was a small pond, that might be an issue. The little tiny water lily I have in this pond that you just saw, I've got a lot of moving water, because I got the fish that squirts, and I've got the cascade, and the times I've had enough sun and I remembered to fertilize it, it's had a flower. So I don't think you'd want, like if there was a cascade, I don't think you'd want the water cascading onto the leaves of it. But I've had moving water and they were. Other questions?
Sorry, two questions. One, you mentioned, moving water discourages, mosquitoes.
Right.
How about those mosquito pellets?
You know, I have never used them in my pond where I've had my fish, because the fish will eat anything that's up at the surface, and I'm afraid they eat the mosquito pellets.
The fish will eat the mosquito larvae though.
Yes,
Oh,
they
there you
will eat the mosquito larvae.
Okay.
That's a treat, actually.
Yeah, it is. As is their own eggs too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's why, you know, a goldfish will lay hundreds of eggs, but they're a tasty treat. So if you get a few little babies, you're lucky. But the pellets, I'm afraid the goldfish would eat them and then die from them.
Yeah. What about frogs?
Frogs are great. And frogs will naturally come to the pond.
Oh,
And it's better, you'll attract more ponds if you have, those little shelves where it's easy to get in and out, so they can jump in and out easier. But yeah, the frogs, I usually have multiple frogs, and that's nice, it's fun to see the frogs in the pond. Were there any questions online, Jim?
no, just, one person, Jane, had said, my understanding is that mosquitoes will not lay eggs in moving water. And I also have frogs when they see it. So, so
Yeah, now-
per your point,
Yeah,
Oh.
exactly, which is why you need some kind of little pump or something to be
Yeah.
moving the water, so it's not stagnant, you don't want a mosquito there. So off the subject of water gardens, are there any general questions anybody has that they would like to ask? I'll do my best to answer them.
What will the effect of this drought be on next year's flowers?
I know, that's hard to say, you know, fortunately, this is now getting into the dormant time of the year. But it would not be a year, like a lot of times at this time of year, I'm going into the garden centers and looking for those 50% off. And this is not a year I would probably do that because of how dry it's been. So it's gonna be interesting to see what happens next year. And the chrysanthemums, whoever said I put in chrysanthemums and they were all dying, it was just because we weren't getting our normal amount of rain that we normally get in September and
I
October.
got the 7 inches at the end of September, and that was.
Yeah, that was it. Mother Nature turned off the faucet.
Right,
It was like the spring, we had a really wet, what was it, May that was so wet, and then it was like, boom.
well, it turned on May 20th, it was cool and wet right up to May
Uh-huh.
20th, and all of a sudden it was 70 degrees, and the day after that, the pollen came, and the day after that, the tourists came.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think you got that right. I really do. I really do. I put a plug in for if any of you, have a vegetable garden and have never tried garlic right now is the right time.
I put 100 head in.
Yeah, I got all my clothes I did yesterday. That's this weekend's job.
Where did you get them? You said.
I just keep, well, originally I got them from a place called Maine Potato Lady. But if you're local and you wanna get them, don't use what's in the grocery store because it's been treated with a grocery card. But if you go to the Orleans Farmers Market on Saturday morning, Dr. Chum, my dentist, has wonderful organic garlic that you can then plant them.
What variety do you like?
I mostly got Russian red, What-
I'm a German white kind of guy.
but I have some German white too, you know? Yeah. I experiment every once in a while with a different variety. No, I don't like that, it's all the time.
Is it wrong to use your own garlic from Boston?
Oh,
That
that's
I
what
don't
you do, sure. If you grew garlic last year, you used the Luther Burbank way of gardening, you keep your best heads,
Right.
and those are the cloves that you use for next year.
Biggest cloves.
Biggest cloves.
Yeah.
And I usually, they don't have to be real deep, and then I use my fist to, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then about that, rows about like that. It can be further, but about like that. And, Dr. Chum said, put blood meal and bone meal on them.
Heavy feeders.
They are heavy feeders. And so what I'll do is I will, put a little string in my garden and do a furrow for my garlic. And I'll take my bone meal and blood meal and I'll sprinkle it down the furrow. Then I put in my cloves, cover them up. And I use, for all of us, C-Rack. What you get, you know, it's like,
The rack line at the beach.
Yeah.
The dry tea.
yeah, and that is a perfect mulch for your garden. Because it has minerals in it. I was so afraid to use that it would be too salty, but the head of our master gardener said, no, it's great for your gardens because it's got a lot of minerals that we need in our soil. Now, it doesn't decompose quickly. So what I tend to do is I put it over my garlic, my asparagus, and my strawberry plants. And then in the spring, I pull it off and I throw it into the compost pile, burn it. Because in my regular veggie garden, it's not gonna decompose fast enough. But it gives you, you know, it's easy to pick up and get. And it makes a great little blanket for things like your garlic or your asparagus or strawberry.
It's the brown seaweed, not the green.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
Yeah,
It's like Solpay is probably, yeah, that's,
The lining by the high tide line.
yeah, it's the high tide line. It's whatever's in there. And of course, if there's junk like fishing line or something, you take it out. But you can get it about at any beach. It's easy to pick up. you come down Dire Prince Road, you can walk right down into the little marsh there and pick it up and park right in the street and take it. I mean, it's easy, and like I said, the minerals are very good for the garden. So anything tender that you have that you wanna cover, use that seed wrap. It's good, and it's a good recycling, and it's free. So, any other questions? And I just gave a plug for garlic. And like I said, keep your best clothes for the next year, and it just keeps going and going and going. So, and every once in a while, I experiment with a different one. And if you wanna try it, even if you only have a little area, my next door neighbor, who's seasonal, has like a raised flower bed, and she puts in a row of garlic right next to the foundation. Cause she just stopped over the other day and said, can I have that head of garlic from my flower pot? So, you can do it in a small area, and fresh garlic is just so good.
And you're supposed to cut the escapes.
Yes.
The escape will come up and it'll make a curl.
Yeah.
And as soon as the point at the end of the escape touches the stem, you cut them.
Yep.
And they're delicious.
They're great in stir fry. You can make pesto out of them. And what I tend to do is I always have way more than I can use, so I chop them up and freeze them. And then if I'm making a soup or a stew and I want a little bit of the garlic flavor, into the pot they go. So, yeah, the scapes are great. So, and you need to do that. You need to cut those scapes, because what that does is, instead of the garlic bulb, putting it energy into making seed off the end of the scape, it then pushes it down into the root, which makes the bulb better. Garlic's a great thing. It's easy to grow. It's like the easiest thing to grow.
Like that's a no-brainer, and nothing eats it. No
Nothing likes it.
Nothing likes it except for me.
Yeah. Squirrel, stuff, fire, nothing. Lots of it, yeah, and it's not really disease prone, so, and once you find variety you like, you just keep
And it's
following.
really pretty if you have a nice row of it, but as the escapes just start
Oh,
to
they're
turn.
pretty,
My neighbors actually came over and took pictures of it.
yeah,
And they're
Yeah.
like, wow.
I think my husband went to Dr. Chung yesterday to get his teeth cleaned, and I think he said to him, he has 12 varieties of garlic they sell at the farmer's market. So, it's fun. I mean, this whole yard is like pots of garlic. It's funny when I go to the dentist, but he's a the Orleans farmer. I don't need to do a commercial. That's, and it drives me crazy. In the spring, the garden centers will have garlic for sale to plant. But if you plant it, garlic needs that cold period. And if you plant garlic in the spring, you're gonna get one big clove.
The
So-
Italians in upstate New York would say, you plant it after the first full moon of October.
Yeah.
Thumb depth this far apart.
Yeah, someday, yeah, that's good. I just figure with the garlic, when I do the furrow to put it in, I just figure, once again, as high as the clove is that I'm planting, it would be just about exactly what you're saying. But yeah, it's
Not even.
it's so easy. If you haven't tried it, try garlic. If you cook with it and you enjoy it, you can use it in the spring with escapes. And it's fun. So, well, thank you very much. You're very welcome. You're very welcome.